All right, welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg. So glad to be talking to you finally on Wednesday. It is the 26th day of November. Tuesday. I said Wednesday. I was thinking Wednesday because I was speaking to a potential guest, somebody I'm hoping will call in later in the program, and something that she posted kind of triggered or got me going in terms of a good topic. And I thought it would be great if she joined us. So we'll see. She said she wants to, but maybe today isn't a great day for her. So we're looking at maybe a guest at 2:30 to call in or join us by the Google Meet, which would be obviously my preference because then we get to see each other. It makes for, I think, a little more interactive experience than just having a caller by phone. But you are always welcome, and I always want you to join me to share your views of today's program or any program, even if it wasn't today. 240-242-5646, or really any topic at all. And yeah, we got a late start day. You know what happened? And I'll talk a little bit about tech. Sometimes I talk about tech. I'm not only about politics. I guess it's my primary focus, but I do have interest in technology and sports, a lot of other topics as well. Movies, especially old movies. Really haven't gone to see any recent films in quite some time, unfortunately. And I do say unfortunately because it's something to do, right? It'd be something kind of cool and it's cultural and all that. But I just haven't been out to the movies and haven't had any interest. But we'll talk a little bit about tech because the problem. And I always have got some excuse, some explanation for why, if there's a glitch, something doesn't go across, you don't hear me, it doesn't look right. I've always got some answer. And the answer I'm going to give you today is that I was updating, or I did update. I did update yesterday from the Windows 11 23 update to the 2024 update. And stupidly, I didn't test everything in advance. I just sort of assumed, well, if you update, it won't change your system settings. Au contraire, what Windows did is it wiped out pretty much all of my audio routing. So that means the routing from my microphone to the live stream. It means from callers to the live stream and to the speaker so I can hear them. So obviously that's not going to work, right? As soon as I started the live stream, I said I was going to start at 12:15 to accommodate, I hope to accommodate the guests I was mentioning, but then they couldn't make it at 12:15. But when I did start, as I had planned to at 12:15, I couldn't hear my background music, the Beethoven Für Elise. And it's really interesting to me. They identify it right away, and you can even, I think, see in the YouTube video, it mentions that Für Elise. As far as I can tell, that recording is in the public domain. Nobody cares. It's fine. I can play it, but they do identify it, which is kind of interesting. So I hope you'll join me again, 240-242-5646, but that Windows update kind of caused the delay, kind of messed everything up for me. And it's fine. I mean, whatever, that these things happen. Sorry if it caused you any inconvenience. The nice thing about YouTube, the nice thing about doing these podcasts, unlike radio, is they're there forever and YouTube, maintains it. So I don't really have to do much. I do some editing after the fact if there are problems with the video at some point, if there's some kind of audio issues, maybe you hear double audio if Arlen's on and I'm talking loud, and he's talking and you hear him twice, that's a problem. So we'll deal with that. But most of the time they work pretty well, and it's a great system. One of the reasons I don't write as much is because it was really hard for me to get the writing out so lots of folks would see it. It's true for these videos too, but the distribution is there. It's just how do I get more people to watch? If you have any thoughts, let me know. I actually got somebody who reached out to me and said, I can help you with SEO, search engine optimization. But I think these are people who kind of go through the millions of feeds out there and try to find people they think they can, maybe work with. Maybe it's on the up and up. I don't want to be too skeptical, but I think also there's some it's just people trying to build a business, and they're looking to work with anybody that maybe can write a check. Here we go. The tragedy in Gaza entering its the murders, really the massacres, the pogroms, the genocide in Gaza now in its second year and full blown. I mean, Israel has been persecuting and oppressing Palestinians for 76 years now, right? Since 47, 48, when it was founded. And I really, it's hard for me to think of it that way because, at least in the early years, I want to believe that Israel was making an effort, that the citizens there were really making an effort to live in peace with the Palestinian people. And I haven't delved, to be fair. I'm not a student of the history. I haven't looked closely at it. I understand that there's dispute over whether the new Israeli government pushed out hundreds of thousands of Palestinians from their homes into the West Bank area, into Gaza, or whether some of them left voluntarily. I know there's a dispute. If they left voluntarily, it was because they were afraid. They were afraid of what was going to happen. And they had reason to be afraid, but tragically, the situation for Palestinians in the West Bank, and especially in Gaza, is even worse, is even more fraught than for the minority in Israel proper. So it's been a terrible, terrible 75 years. That's why they call it the Nakba, the catastrophe, because that's what it is. 44,250, according to Anadolu Ajansi. And I always wondered I never thought about what agency meant, but now I know it means agents, like agency. It's the Anadolu News Agency, and that's Turkey. Anatolia is another word in English for the region we call Turkey, they call Turkey. But I guess in the Turkish language that would be Anadolu Ajansi. So it's the Turkish news agency there, and they're reporting close to 44,250 dead. The latest count, 14 more killed since yesterday in Gaza. And they get it up to 44,249. So again, we know these numbers are a little bit, they're squishy, but you can always assume that the death count, especially since October 7th, is far higher than what's being reported, because there just are so many people that we don't even know what happened to them due to Israel. And we're going to spend a lot of time talking about Israel and talking about what and Gaza, and talking about what the U.S. government, its responsibility, both parties now. Now, we're really worried. The fear, of course, now is that the Trump administration will continue pursue the exact same policy, full-blown, unwavering support for genocide that Biden-Harris has. That's the fear. That's my fear. And, just the numbers one more time, because I like to put them on a separate little board there. So 44,245. More than that, they identify 44,249. I'm not sure. Again, it's a squishy number. Maybe a few higher. The identified count might be higher. And 14 identified victims yesterday. We'll get into that. Some of Trump's latest announcements, or the tea leaf reading in the Wall Street Journal, does not give one hope. Does not give one hope that Trump is going to ratchet down the violence, because the U.S. government could. Right now, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris could stop the murders. They could stop the killing. And those of you who say, no, they couldn't, Israel's got all the weapons, even if they cut them off today, there'd still be more bombs to be dropped. My response is, he's the commander-in-chief. Send in the U.S. At this point, you send in the U.S. military. And I've been saying this for a long time. But there's simply, if it were the other way around, if Jordan, Syria, Egypt Iran had all attacked, invaded Israel, and were, through that vice, choking off the entire region and committing atrocities on an almost unimaginable scale, as Israel is, I can guarantee you that AIPAC And many billionaires in this country would be insisting that the U.S. military has to go in and help Israel. We would deploy tanks. We would deploy anti-aircraft weaponry. We would deploy bombers. We would do everything which we could do in our overly considerable power to end the destruction, the eradication of the state of Israel. And that would include deploying our military. Now, Israel, with our guns, our bombs, our missiles, is wiping out an entire group of people. And if there were no other way to stop it, and I don't believe that at this point there might not be, Joe Biden, Kamala Harris still have an ability to stop it by deploying the U.S. military. And that's what they should do. And they won't. So they're complicit, and they should do it for another reason. They should do it because people shouldn't be killed, especially with our guns, our bombs, by our closest ally. So that's why they should do it. But if you even made the argument, and some would say, well, hell, you don't think we should be in Ukraine. You don't think we should be stopping Russia from crushing Ukraine. And my response is, well, we should be, but we should be doing it not militarily. We should be in negotiations. We should be using, the very, very powerful carrots that the U.S. economy has to incentivize Russia not to continue killing Ukrainians. But we shouldn't be sending our weaponry, our bombs, our guns, our missiles, our long-range missiles. No, we promoted this war. We promulgated it. We provoked it. And now our defense industry is profiting from it. But we're not responsible in the sense that, we green-lighted and have actually been funding the Russian invasion the way we are actually financing and supplying the Israelis. So that's why we have an absolute moral obligation without any question whatsoever to do everything possible. But again, if you wanted to say, well, hell, we shouldn't be putting our boots on the ground, here's another reason. It does really look, and I'm very afraid that Trump will pursue the exact same policy that Biden Harris. Now, you want to say it's going to be worse. I don't know how to say it's be worse. I don't know how it could be worse. It's not clear to me it will be worse. But it's so bad now that if it's equally bad then, Biden Harris have a duty to stop Trump from promoting or from continuing this killing. So that's why they should send in the military. For all those reasons and more. All right, 240-242-5646. 240-242-5646. May get a call around 2:30, and I think I will. Let me see I guess I need to start my meeting just in case we do get that caller, because I don't want to that's interesting. So I don't want to miss my caller if they join me. So let's see if I can get them on. Well, I'm not going to actually get the call involved right now, but we will see whether there's a chance that, if they can call in about 15 minutes. So that's fine. We're set with that. Now, with regard to yesterday's program, I'm going to revisit. I don't often do that, but there were a few, and I was watching part of it, and I noticed a couple things. So I just wanted to share them with you. Couple questions. Let's just start with the easy one. So I was listening. I always check just to make sure it sounds okay, the audio's good, especially if I'm afraid there might have been a problem. And I think everything sounded fine yesterday. So I just want to play this clip from very early on, because there's a sound in there, and I guess I made it. I have no idea what it is. If you have any idea what this sound is, let me know. 240-242-5646. Here we go. What was that? Jimba, what was that? Did you hear that? Let me play that again for you. And I have the closed caption going because I was listening to it and I was like, what the hell was that? And it doesn't even show, but it's definitely there. Am I not playing it? I guess it's a little bit late. Let me get over here. What was that? Isn't that weird? By the way, double hell. Wasn't that strange? What was I saying? I have no idea what that was. Jimbe! I don't know. I mean, there must have been some reason for me to make that weird sound. I don't think I have Tourette's. I was never... Got some issues. Got some mental health issues. I don't think I have Tourette's. Fortunately, don't really have any physical issues. Well, some stenosis, neck problems, back. Found out my son has a little bit of that too. It's kind of a arthritic type condition, narrowing of your spinal column, and it's not good. I mean, it's painful. It's not life-threatening or anything, thank gosh. And of course, I would never want my son. I love him. I want him to have a long, healthy life. But getting the pain in your neck, and apparently that is something that's hereditary. Because the doctor asked, they said, "Do you have that in your family?" And he's like, "Oh, I said no, because I didn't think I do." And I said, "Son, I got stenosis. I guess that's where you got it. Narrowing of the spaces, really between the discs in your neck is where it is in both of us, and it's unfortunate because it causes pain, causes sciatica and everything else." All right, I have been, the program, the purpose of this program, and you saw it, and not just this program, but every program that I do, is to try to solve our problems, come up with something we can do, and I've been promoting, political solutions. I don't know that there's any other. Some would say there's no political solution anymore. It's over. We can't solve the problem. I say we have to go green. That's the only possible. I don't see any other option around the horizon. If you are aware of one, let me know. 240-242-5646. Got a couple of folks in the chat. Appreciate Ari and Emogi, my two most loyal posters. Yeah, Ari, I was saying we should send the U.S. military. Biden-Harris should deploy it to Israel to stop the genocide. That's what we should do. I don't see a solution. By the way, one other point, and I'm rambling a little bit or jumping around, digressing. So I got this criticism. I think it was a criticism from a listener who said, "You are a stream of consciousness type broadcaster. You just go from one topic, whatever's in your mind." And I don't think that was completely fair. I really don't. I prepare. I have topics laid out, but it is true I will sometimes go from one topic somewhat abruptly to another. So for those who find that jarring, disconcerting, sorry. The Democrats are not part of the solution. The Democrats are part of the problem. And here is a good example of that. I have been telling folks a lot. You gotta look at people based on their policies. I've been saying this forever. We have to judge politicians based on their policies and look at what can or cannot be done. And what was the immediate reaction to Matt Gaetz is he's a creep, he's a sleaze, he's disgusting. And I'm not saying that's not true. But for the American people, what matters more than his personal peccadillos, or even worse, personal crimes, what matters is what he will do or would do if he became Attorney General. If he committed crimes, we have people called the police, we have people called district attorneys, we have people called U.S. attorneys, and their job is to investigate reports of criminal activity, to indict, to arrest, to issue warrants, to do all of those things. And they didn't do any of those things. Well, they did an investigation, and they concluded there wasn't sufficient evidence to indict or arrest Gaetz. If that changes, they can go ahead and arrest or indict him. But when it comes to policy, this guy was a lot better, not a little bit, a lot better than we would have hoped, I would have hoped to get from Trump. And yet Democrats were at one that we've got to get rid of him. We got it. So what do you get? You got Pam Bondi. You get somebody who did not join as Attorney General a lawsuit against Trump University, which had taken advantage of Floridians, which had defrauded promised them an education, promised them that they would get, a degree, that Trump University was a qualified institution, and it wasn't. It was a fraud. It was a phony. And she did not, she stopped the prosecution of Trump University because she got a campaign contribution from Trump Industries or from some Trump group. That's how come she got rewarded to be now the Attorney General nominee in lieu of Matt Gaetz. Democrats didn't play the long game, didn't care. And actually, they probably did care. They probably didn't want Matt Gaetz. Not because they could give a rat's fat butt if he committed statutory rape or had sex with a prostitute. Not because they care about that. They don't want a guy who joins with Ilhan Omar, I always get that wrong, I'm sorry, Ilhan, who joins with Ilhan Omar to try to get U.S. troops out of Somalia. I talked about this yesterday, and I was fumbling around, and I was like, wait, who did he join with again? And I knew he did something about Somalia. So Ilhan Omar, the one Somali in the U.S. Congress, and Matt Gaetz worked together on this resolution. Well, guess what? Democratic leadership doesn't like that at all. And neither particularly does Republican leadership. Democratic leadership doesn't like the fact that Matt Gaetz talked a good game about antitrust lawsuits against big tech. They don't like the fact that he opposed our military interventions in Yemen, in Ukraine, where he introduced resolutions to stop funding that war. So that's why he's not going to be part of the reason he won't be Attorney General. I'm not saying he didn't bring it on himself, obviously, but if you were on the side of the American people, if the Democratic Party could be part of the solution, then people like AOC wouldn't be out there clucking and tutting and clutching their pearls over Matt Gaetz. They would say, yeah, we don't like him personally, but you know what? His policies aren't that bad. In fact, in some ways, they're pretty darn good. So we're going to actually support him. And guess what? They would have had a little bit more influence also over Gaetz, over the Justice Department, if they had said, hey, we can work with Trump on this. And, Trump is such a narcissist, right? He responds so well to flattery. You're an enemy one day, you're little Marco one day, the next day you're tapped to be the Secretary of State. So Democrats should say, hey, we commend President Trump on his wise choice of Matt Gaetz to be the Attorney General. Could do that, but of course they won't, because they're hyper-partisan, A, and B, they're beholden to the billionaire class, which doesn't like Matt Gaetz. He's a wild card. He might actually try to break up big tech. He might go after Google and Apple. Can't have that. Can't have that. Bernie gets it. Is it a day late and a dollar short? Probably. By the way, Emogi, tell that to AIPAC. Yeah, well, I do tell AIPAC we should be sending military into Israel to stop Israel. But yeah, AIPAC has a lot more power than I do. From Bernie, the Democrats are on a campaign protecting the status quo and tinkering around the edges. No question. Will they learn the lessons of their defeat and create a party that stands with the working class? Highly unlikely. Right, because they're not, the Democratic leadership would prefer to lose, in quotations, to Trump than to win with a pro-worker candidate, than to become a pro-democracy, pro-life party. That's not who they are. That's not what they want. That's not, Pritzker, right? Governor J.B. Pritzker. He's a real billionaire. He told you that. So they're not going to change. And that's what Bernie tells you. They are much too wedded to the billionaires and corporate interests that fund them. So Bernie's in his 80s. When he had a shot, when he could have maybe actually built in the aftermath of the collapsed 2016 campaign against Hillary Clinton, when he had an opportunity, he could have taken down. I think he really could have drawn a lot of Democratic support. I think he should have run for president that year as an independent, as a Green. He could have. Nothing could have. I know he swore or whatever. Oh, I will support the Democrat no matter what. But so what? So you just say, yeah, I lied. Sue me. Sorry. Anyway, you cheated me out of it. CNN gave the questions for the debate to Hillary. The DNC shared its funds with Hillary. So, yeah, you don't like it, too bad. I'm running as a Green. And he should have. It's late, but, I'll take it. Better late than never. But you know what? Bernie doesn't present a real path forward. He asks the question, should we be supporting independent? He doesn't even say Green. Independent, and this is just a part of the letter. I just cut and pasted, obviously. But he asked, should we be supporting independent candidates who are prepared to take on both parties? Well, why not support the Green Party, which actually exists right now and is right there? See, this is what I don't get, Bernie. Why can't you do that? Why are you against that option? Why don't you even contemplate it? It seems to me, and I've been saying this is the only option you have, right? There's no other path forward of which I'm aware. And you start, instead of asking questions, say, this is what I believe we need to do. This is what I believe we need to do. Some folks are saying Bernie's looking at starting his own party, a new party. There's nothing in this letter that says that. The only question he asks is, should we be supporting independent candidates? What we need is we need an alternative. And the only alternative of which I'm aware is the Green Party. There are, I know there's a few others. Socialist and Workers' Party, Claudia de la Cruz, Peace and Justice Party. I know there are a few others, and I'm open to those, but none of them have nearly the ballot access of the Greens. None of them have nearly the reach of the Greens, which is limited for sure, but at least they have something. Why not coalesce behind them? I don't think they're perfect. They're a little too identity politicky for me. But they're pro-peace. They're pro-worker. They're pro-labor. They're pro-environment. They're not for growth at all costs. So why Bernie doesn't support that, I don't know. And why don't it keeps boggling my mind and breaking my heart that this is so hard for others to figure. Trump is not the answer. I know some people really want to believe that, and I understand it. I mean, I understand that impulse. People used to say, "Oh, if only the czar knew how bad things were for us. If only he knew how we, the serfs, were suffering, the czar would do something about it." And there is that impulse. I mean, Trump isn't a Democrat, so he gets points for that. And he has, on occasion, kind of campaigned as a populist. But in the end, he's a corporatist, billionaire Republican. There just isn't reason to think there's daylight there. I want to give a more than a hat tip to Jordan Sheridan for alerting me to this story. So this was something I noticed he was discussing, and I thought this is a really important article. There are some Trump picks I can't stand. There are some that I don't stand. I don't hate. Or can't stand. Right? Gates. Tulsi are two. Hegseth is a little interesting in some ways because he has been a bit of a critic of the mic, but he may go down actually and he doesn't come from that milieu. He was actually a real soldier. He doesn't come from the milieu of the defense contractors the way Anthony Blinken, for example, does. I think Rubio is a better choice for defense secretary. Not happy with him, but I think he's a better choice. Oh, no, Secretary of State, I'm sorry. Hegseth, defense secretary. Secretary of State is the most important of the positions when it comes to foreign policy, including the military. I don't like Rubio at all. He's not quite as bad as Blinken. Blinken is from the same ilk of these choices that Trump is looking at for deputy Defense Department secretary. And the Secretary of Defense he identified as Hegseth, but Hegseth may go down because he, like Gates, is too maybe worse and a sexual predator as well in any event. So who does Trump go to? Venture capitalists, private equity investors in the industry itself. These are people who profit from endless war, who build weapons systems. It's very scary. It's 100% conflict of interest. These are people who profit from war. And this is who the Wall Street Journal tells us he's considering. So again, Hegseth, maybe not great, but certainly a far sight above these guys, these ghouls. It's really not something, and again, these are deputies, but what they show is that Trump has gone to the swamp to staff his administration. I'll just go through this real quick because I don't want this to also appear, and I want to be clear about this. This isn't just an indictment of Trump. This is also an indictment of Harris Biden, because these are the same exact folks that they pursue the same exact policies that Harris Biden did, that Anthony Blinken did. By the way, we have Kirsten with us, so I want to bring Kirsten on. And Kirsten, it's going to be a little bit of a challenge here because now usually I do all this before the program, but I so wanted to accommodate Kirsten Stade. You're going to have to say your name for me too, because we've only met online. Let me get you in there. It's not going to look perfect yet. And I'm also going to start my virtual camera. So you should be able to see me, Kirsten. Thanks so much for joining. Say hello.
Hi, Kirsten Stade is the pronunciation. Nice to see you, Hal.
It's great to see you. And also, you know what, I was really happy when you said Kirsten Stade, I heard you because I told you had some tech problems and I wasn't, and there you go. Now you should be fully on board. We're almost there. I'm going to get rid of the Andy Ellis name. That is not your name, Kirsten Stade. So Kirsten, just real quick, talking about the military-industrial complex, and my major concerns with Trump is he's bringing these venture capital defense industry ghouls, apparently going to bring them into the government, and it's just one more thing to be really upset about.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. I mean, as you and I connected on a little bit earlier, it's hard to imagine a foreign policy more disastrous than Biden's. But if anyone can do it, Trump is the man for the job, right? So, yeah, it's terrifying. It's terrifying the paths we're pursuing already, and what Trump promises to bring can only be worse.
So, are you told me this, and but I'll ask it anyway, even though I know the answer. Do you have some optimism for the future, for our species, for our country?
I'd say the optimism I have is localized, community-based. The optimism is for people who have already started building alternatives. So I think our society writ large is going down a path that it's too late to turn back from. The decisions we would have had to have made to really build something sustainable would have had to have been made 40, 50 years ago. We could have made choices to not keep growing. We could have made choices to switch to some technologies that are better in some ways than the ones we're pursuing now. Although, you know, as you and I have talked about, no technology at the scale that is needed to power our current society is sustainable. So, you know, we would have had to make decisions about contraction and degrowth a long time ago to avoid the future we're facing, which looks increasingly like collapse at this point.
Can there be still degrowth that doesn't cause massive dislocation and human suffering?
I think we can soften the landing. We could. I think the subjunctive case is better, and is where we're at right now. I don't think in our current political system, campaign finance, environment, there's any real chance of making those, of having leaders who would make those decisions. So,
well, one of my concerns now also is just that we're at a point, and I want you to comment on this. I know you're an expert. You've worked with the what is it? The Carbon Institute, the Beyond Carbon. Explain, because I'm confused. I've confused myself.
Yeah, no. The article that you saw was by Richard Heinberg of the Post-Carbon Institute, and they are friends, associates of my organization, which is called Population Balance. And there's a you know, sort of a community, a network of organizations and people who think about collapse and who think about the global poly crisis. So interconnected crises from climate change, biodiversity collapse to worsening wealth inequality, you know, the sway of corporations and the military industrial complex over our political system, how our economic system is increasingly geared to only benefit a very few at the top. And yet the messaging, the marketing has been geared to trick us all into believing that we need economic growth for all of us to, you know, uplift those in poverty, to solve climate change. And those are, you know, those are delusions. But,
I mean, what I want just jump in real quick, because what I'm really most afraid of is that the billionaire class, the elites, and they do recognize what you're saying. They're not stupid. They know what's going on and they're informed, that they will make the decision that we're going to have to cut back on consumption, and everyone else will have to cut back except for us, which obviously would lead to massive starvation and all sorts of other horrors, especially because they control so much already. They've already hoarded so much of our world's wealth that there's not enough for everyone else, even if we did cut back right now and distribute in an equitable, equal fashion.
Yeah, I would agree that that's sort of the most imminent danger is running out of the resources that fuel our entire society, right? So it's all powered by cheap energy. Cheap energy is oil, mostly. It's coal, oil, fossil fuels. You know, it's an addiction, and you know, there are those, certainly they're the mainstream solutionism directed towards climate change as well. We'll just use renewable technologies, but all of those, first of all, to build them out requires a massive pulse of fossil fuel consumption that will not be able to be used for just running what we've got right now. So we'll have to redirect those fuels, which are in increasingly short supply. Peak oil is past. We bought ourselves a few years through the discovery of fracking, which of course is not a clean extraction process either. But that allowed us to, you know, pull out a little bit more fossil fuels from the earth that we're using to power things now. But it's dwindling. It's a finite resource. So to transition, you know, a clean energy transition to solar, electric vehicles, wind turbines, requires massive extraction of trace minerals to build all those things from cobalt to lithium. All these things, a lot of them are in very dry areas. Their mining uses massive quantities of water. Often it requires displacement of indigenous populations, pollution of water supplies. And just to build these things is going to, again, require this massive infusion of fossil fuels. So to solve climate change, we're going to, inject a massive additional amount of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, just worsening our problem.
Kirsten Stade with us on Halitics. So glad to have her joining us. I did put there just the newsletter that you shared. This is how I reached out to you. I saw you post this, and I believe I may once have interviewed Richard Heinberg years and years ago when I did radio. He was I think peak oil was a big theory that was current 15 years ago when I would have spoken to him. And my problem with peak oil, Kirsten, is I welcomed it. I wanted there to be peak oil. But even now we're seeing the Democrats, up until the election, boasting about how the U.S. was extracting more petroleum than it ever had before, than any nation in the history of the world had.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, somehow we still, speak, the Democrats at least speak one side of their mouths on, fighting climate change. And on the other side, we're still in that extractive, growth-oriented mindset where it's just all about growth, all about pushing what we're pushing, getting the last bit out to continue business as usual. And it's obviously not sustainable. Nor is the so-called clean energy economy that they'll also promise us.
Talk about that. Talk about electric vehicles, which I actually have. Tell us why that's not the answer.
So, quote unquote, renewable technologies are actually better, more accurately described as rebuildable technologies. So all of these things, windmills, solar panels, all this infrastructure will need to be rebuilt. That's another layer of infrastructure that, of course, has to be rebuilt. Everything we've got now, roads, bridges, all infrastructure needs to be rebuilt. But the renewable technologies will need a reinvestment of everything we need to inject for the initial build out, again, in 20 years. And these a lot of the minerals required, lithium, cobalt, molybdenum, they're trace metals. They're called trace metals for a reason, which is that there's not a lot of them. So people say, well, we can recycle them, but of course recycling is it's not closed loop. You degrade the quality of the thing you're recycling a little bit each time, so there's less to use, less quality, less amount. So there's that. There's the minerals, the massive mining required to extract these minerals. All of it with water quality implications. A lot of it is mined using child labor, slave labor. Just really rough ecological impacts of all these things, ecological and social impacts. So those, we can't talk about clean technology without really taking a hard look at how these things are built out. And once again, the massive investment of fossil fuels to build them out. It doesn't even get talked about, but I guess when pressed, renewable energy enthusiasts might say, well, we can build renewable energy with renewable energy, but renewable energy is a lot less energy dense than fossil fuels. So per unit infrastructure and per unit source, I'm obviously not an expert. I'm a conservation biologist. I'm not a geoengineer.
That's a lot higher up on the pole than I am. When you started saying biologist, I was like, what? I don't think I even took biology. How did you deal? Did you have to deal with those frogs where you put them in the suffocate them, or do they don't do that anymore?
No, it's so interesting you asked that, because I actually turned down a graduate program that was going to be exactly that, torturing frogs. And once I realized that, I was like, oh boy, not for me. No, it's more a policy-oriented graduate program at Columbia, conservation biology. I wanted to study communication because I wanted to study how do you talk to people about these things that in a way that makes them not shut down. Because, renewable energy folks, their heart's in the right place. I don't want to alienate them. But I do want us to look, in a clear-eyed way at what's really coming. And I don't think we can escape a massive change. We're not going to transition this society onto renewable technology and have the same thing, only clean and green, right? We can power some. We can use renewable energy. We have to use renewable energy. It's definitely better. We can't continue to be fossil fueled. Fossil fuels are finite. We're going to run out. So we're going to have to power ourselves somehow. We're going to have to power a much smaller society, though. It's going to have to be a much scaled back version of what we have now. People who have studied this have worked the numbers, and there's consensus among those who have researched population that 2 or 3 billion would be a good number for powering on sustaining a middle-class, relatively comfortable lifestyle.
Let me just jump in real quick, because one of the points in the article that you posted, and I think this is so true, is that global overpopulation is actually driven by the elites. It's driven by the billionaire class to a significant degree, because more labor, more consumers means more profits for them, even though in the end it means less for everybody except for them.
Well, and look who's pushing it now. It's the oligarchs, Putin and Elon Musk. Those are the people really pushing pronatalist ideology. So my organization, Population Balance, works on countering pronatalism. My first peer-reviewed paper was challenging pronatalism as key to advancing reproductive rights and a sustainable planet. So pronatalism is all these societal...
What does that mean, pronatalism? I'm sorry, I don't know what that term means.
Just pressure to have kids. It's everything from...
So you're opposed to it. You're opposed to pronatalism, because when you said it, I thought maybe you were a pronatalist, and that didn't sound right.
No. Yeah, right. No, pronatalism is pressure to have kids, and people, especially women, but also men, experience it everywhere. Everything from, songs and advertising and romance novels that glorify motherhood and tell us we're not complete unless we procreate. Russia has just passed legislation that criminalizes spreading child-free ideology. So anybody who talks about, the joys of not having kids now faces a stiff penalty. So these are abortion bans are another example.
I mean, we are seeing in Europe, though, and I think Russia is one of the countries included in that, degrowth. We're actually seeing populations dropping. In Italy, I think they have like 1.1 child per woman, some incredibly low number. So is that a positive, or is that a good sign in your view?
It's it's the result of women having choice. In every country in the world where women have access to contraceptives and where they are somewhat empowered so that they can resist pronatalist pressures. For example, pronatalism could show up as a husband who beats you if you use contraception covertly. So when women gain some education, empowerment, some options, some career options also, they can resist these kind of pressures. And
let me be really controversial and maybe irritating. I don't know. Maybe you won't be. But, it's interesting when you said that, because I was thinking of women, and my wife has told me about friends who stopped taking birth control and don't tell their husbands.
Yeah. Not a good look either. I mean, definitely problematic. And certainly there are women, there are men, there are people who want large families. What we would argue is that it's very hard to make authentic choice. It's very hard for me as a woman, having grown up in this society, to say authentically, I want to have 4 kids, because every influence I've taken in by osmosis since girlhood, has told me, oh, that's my true, that's how I find fulfillment. That's how women find fulfillment. That's how you contribute to society. That's what you're here for, basically. So in, pronatalism, we say, is the water in which we swim. Like, we can't even tell that there are all these messages because they're everywhere. They're in everything, they're in doctors who refuse to give us a tubal ligation at age 25 because they're sure, no, you should hold out. Maybe your husband will want them, right? So pronatalism is everywhere. It's very hard to even know that it's there because it's so ubiquitous. And what we see is that in every place in the world where women do gain choice, reproductive choice, they choose small families. So to us, that's a pretty clear indication that there's
Isn't there a lot other factors at play? Quality of life is declining. And if you have choice whether to have children and you're living in a society where you have less leisure time, you have less disposable income. I mean, you may be spending more, but you have to on everything to survive. The air isn't as fresh, the water isn't as clean. Then you're going to make a decision. This isn't a world I want to bring another life into. So I think that it's good, obviously, that women can control their reproductive decision making. But part of it we have to acknowledge is we've created a world where people don't, understandably, consciously, don't necessarily want to have children who might otherwise make the decision they do want to have children.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I would say one consideration is that even in countries that have a pretty strong social safety net, Scandinavian countries, people are still also choosing smaller families. So you can't, and you're absolutely right. Like, even in those countries where things are relatively better, they're still getting pretty rough. But I would say all evidence points to as soon as women have a choice, they do choose smaller families. And absolutely, though, what you're saying is certainly a factor.
I mean, it's a gloomy scenario you set forth. It's basically the same one I talk about on my program. Do you see a political solution? I talk a lot about the Green Party as the only very tiny little light at the end of the tunnel. So few people see that. Do you think there is a political solution? Do you think there's any other possible solution? I know we talk about we have to greatly reduce consumption. We have to reduce, obviously, the children, the number of offspring, but also we have to distribute wealth in a equitable fashion so we don't have mass dislocation, starvation, and the like. Do you think that can be done if we embrace an alternative political solution?
It's like I don't want to say no. I just, I don't see how our system permits that. The current, campaign finance, our current system, of course, rewards those who say exactly what the corporations want them to say, right? Because they're the ones who can fund their campaigns. If we don't have ranked choice voting, instant runoff voting, there's no hope for a Green Party.
Why is that? I don't understand that. We had two genocidal maniacs. Maybe they're not even maniacs. They seem all too sane, especially Harris, but two genocidal candidates. Why? And I'm really asking this because I have no idea the answer. I have tried so hard to get people to say, hey, it's not like if you say to me, well, I'm wasting my vote voting for Stein, but you're wasting your vote voting for Harris too. Mm-hmm. And why is it so hard to get people to understand this or to accept this?
I don't know if you remember, like, as one of the last chapters of the People's History of the United States, Howard Zinn talked about the coming revolt of the Guard. And I just keep coming back to that. What he was saying is, like, a revolution happens when people are sufficiently dissatisfied to, like, rise up against the way things are, right? And so he was saying, well, this hasn't happened yet, or it hasn't happened in a long time in the US because the Guard class, the people who are reasonably comfortable, the doctors, the lawyers, the people who have a decent middle class existence, things haven't gotten bad enough yet for them to rise up. And I think, marketing is such a genius, and the way that the media, the entire media system is in the pocket of, and they're they're in each other's pocket, like the Democratic Party, the Republican Party. They work with the media. They're each other's spokespeople. They work to protect the status quo, right? So, against that backdrop, how can you get past it? Again, like, the only hope might be in our small local alternatives. Like, I'm trying to learn more about, this sounds crazy, but I'm trying to learn more about like local herbs and like edible plants, because it's like it might come down to, I have a food pantry outside.
Bugs, don't forget bugs, crickets, cockroaches. They have protein.
I know it's harder for me because I'm vegan, but yeah, we might be coming there. Taking care
of that. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I'm just curious about this. So would you feel guilt eating a bug? I mean, they do have a nervous system, I suppose, but I don't know. That, to me, I don't see that as quite on the same moral level as eating a cow.
I think you're right. No, I think you're right. I think you can't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. It's definitely better than eating a cow who has definitely a more evolved, nervous system. So yeah, we definitely will probably be making those choices. I'd rather eat plants if I can.
Well, I don't want to eat any bugs, trust me. But I mean, when I was in Mexico, which I shouldn't even talk about travel because it is so bad. It's like the worst thing you can do. And we're human beings. We have desires to live. I've said this: to live is to kill, but we have to try to kill as little as possible. But they do have crickets and stuff that they sell in the markets there, so people do survive on insects in many parts of the world.
Yeah.
And we get some comments from just let me tell you, from the chat. I try to include them whenever possible. Chapelinis, I don't know what that is, and silkworm pupae are tasty. And another comment was, what was it? There was, just urging people to register green, to just as what we were talking about. But there's a number of comments. So you're bringing in the comments, which is great, Kirsten. I really so appreciate it. I was like so psyched when you got back to me too, because I do these programs. I talk for an hour and it's fine, but it's better to bounce off, especially somebody who is so much more knowledgeable on this stuff than I am. I wish I try to be optimistic. But I think what bummed me more than anything else, honestly, was that the Green Party and Jill Stein did so poorly in the most recent election. Do you have messages? And this segues to what I'm saying. Their messaging obviously wasn't effective enough. Do you have ideas on how to message to reach people?
Well, don't take it from me, take it from Bernie Sanders. And he knew it. I sincerely believe that if the DNC's thumb had not been in the scale in the 2016 primary, which I think was how you and I first started talking to each other. I'm not sure about that, but no. So
I don't know. It's possible. I don't recall meeting you or seeing you before.
No, well, I met a lot of folks then in the 2016 primary, because I worked very hard to call voters for Bernie Sanders, because he was someone who got the messaging thing. He got what the Democratic Party has lost, which is that to swing voters, you don't go out there campaigning with Liz Cheney. You talk to them about the economy. You talk to them about healthcare. You talk to them about free college. You talk to them about how their wages at the dollar store have stagnated while the richest guys have only gotten richer. And for some reason, the Democratic Party thought it was a good bet to go out there talking about a return to the values of Ronald Reagan. And that does not speak to regular people. It's like, I just don't know what they're thinking. It's mind-boggling to me, unless there was a meme in 2016 that I just loved. Democrats get paid to lose. And I think that's really got to be it. Like maybe they just don't care that much, because they know they'll get paid. They'll get consulting jobs either way.
Yeah, I just put on the screen. I think you can see this is from Bernie. So I talked about this a little earlier in the program, but it makes sense to bring it back up. He says they're not going to change. And you see where I actually put in the blue, too wedded to the billionaires. So that's exactly what you're saying, Kirsten.
Exactly. And, how to talk to people. Listen to Bernie Sanders. He was packing stadiums with 20,000 people at a time while Hillary Clinton was having, 15-person, fundraisers. So
how do you deal with the argument that we'll never get a woman elected president? I saw this Gail Collins from the New York Times, most influential newspaper in the world, the most powerful. She's one of the top editors. She's incredibly influential. And she's wringing her hands about how Harris's loss coming on the heels of Hillary's loss proves we'll never have a woman president. Women don't have the power of the influence. And I'm thinking, you have an incredibly big megaphone. You write for this. You don't just write. You're a managing editor of this newspaper. Can't you do a little bit better than simply attribute her loss to the fact that she's, to be crude, squats when she goes to the bathroom? Can't you look at her policy? Can't you look at the way she spoke so condescendingly to the American public and didn't answer questions, that she didn't address the problems, as you just said, Kirsten, that people faced every single day, including hundreds of billions of women, that she supports fully, unwaveringly, a genocide where the majority of victims have been women and children? Can't you at least pay lip service to those facts?
Right. They can't, because this is the narrative that saves the Democratic Party from introspection, right? That it's all about identity politics. This was, if you look at that book, Shattered, the thesis there, it came out in the aftermath of the 2016 loss to Trump, is that this is a narrative they had to construct. It was too humiliating to admit that the Democrats had made so many mistakes to run Hillary Clinton in the first place, who's someone just so out of touch with working people, who's so tied into the status quo, the elite, the billionaire class. And they keep doing it again. They keep running candidates like this. I thought Kamala Harris might be a little better just because people knew what Trump was the second time around, and they wouldn't do that again. But again, just this choice again and again to alienate their own voters, to alienate the Democratic base. So if you look at, Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib won in districts that Harris lost. Women of color, right? What's the difference between them and Harris? Well, they speak openly about genocide. They speak openly about bread and butter issues that working voters want to hear about. Once again, universal health care, minimum wage tiered to inflation, things that matter to people, not campaigning with Liz Cheney.
So let me ask you this, because I'm critical. I'm a white dude, obviously, as you can see. I'm privileged. I view myself more privileged because of economics than my gender or race, but they're not, can't separate them all. What is the role that you believe identity politics should play when we talk politics? Because I'm pretty much an economist guy. We should have rights. Everyone has a right to a house. Everyone has a right to healthcare. Everyone has a right to good education. And nobody has a right to billions of dollars. We limit, you can make, and this is my view, I'm just giving it to you, but tell me if I'm missing something that, and you alluded to this a little bit, that, for example, when women have control over their bodies, their reproductive systems, they have fewer children, for example. They're happier. So tell me where I'm missing something when I say the focus needs to be just on pretty much exclusively on economics.
Well, I have to say I'm mostly in agreement with you. There's no question that there's structural racism, there's structural misogyny in our system. Absolutely. The gender and race distribution in political office is a clear indication of that. However, if you, as you say, address class inequities, you end up helping those people who are most marginalized who are people of color. So universal health care helps women, and it helps people of color far more than it helps white people.
And trans people, because if you have doctors are paid by the state, then those who have less money will find that they still get the service they need because doctors will still be able to make a living. But now the whole healthcare industry is targeted towards diseases that rich people get, like cancer, or what was Trump talking about? Helping people have more babies, right? Because some wealthy women want to have children. So that's where what is it that in vitro, IVF? But if we guarantee everyone, including poor people, health care, then the whole industry will start to focus on the needs of marginalized communities.
Absolutely. Yeah, I actually am in agreement with you. And the thing about identity politics is if you get women or people of color who have crappy positions just based on who they are, then that starts legitimizing those crappy positions. So did it help? Does it help, Black people that Clarence Thomas is on the Supreme Court? Does it? No, it just legitimizes all the horrible structural racism that is already in our system. So that's
people can point to Thomas and say we've got an African American man on the Supreme Court, so it's okay. Even a Barack Obama, who ultimately proved to be a servant of the financial industry, has not led to his policies did not improve the quality of life for poor, struggling, marginalized, poor, struggling, working class Americans who are disproportionately Black.
Absolutely, and I've actually noticed somehow Barack Obama, despite being the drone warfare president and exactly his his fealty to the financial industries, is still the golden boy of working class Democrats. And I notice how that also legitimizes all those things that he was. That makes them less willing to question the Democratic Party because they're so because there's still this sort of celebration of this identity politics success. Like we had an African American president, and at the time I was celebrating it too, obviously, of course, because he campaigned. He was a much different candidate than he was president. So we heard a lot of things that Bernie Sanders says from him on the campaign trail. No more once he became president. So, but I noticed with my Democratic friends who still celebrate Barack Obama that his victory makes them even less able to question the failures of the Democratic Party to speak to regular people.
All right, so great to have Kirsten Stade with us. We've gone over the hour. She's with Population Balance. You see the website. I put it on the screen for everybody. I'll keep you for a little longer. Maybe we go to 3:15 or even 3:20 if you can. If not, we'll drop off. But I had a thought. I wanted to sort of go back to something you told me off the air, and I'll ask it very open-ended. What is your take on, or what have you been reading about Joe Biden's legacy? We hear all the time, oh, he's the greatest president for workers ever. He is a great American for stepping aside to let Kamala take the reins. You have a different view, or you have a different opinion you want to share.
Well, just today, before Trump has come into office, which is Joe Biden's fault, but even just today, his legacy is bringing us closer to, nuclear annihilation than experts say, we've ever been. The escalation of the Ukraine conflict, I can't even really speak about Gaza without getting even more apocalyptic than I usually am. But that's been just absolutely just incomprehensible, unfathomable. The genocide that's been not just allowed but encouraged. That's been funded. I mean, there are bombs there. It's basically a U.S. genocide. of
I was reading that our artificial intelligence is used for these missiles, that instead of, as they claim, as our generals and our defense experts claim, can be used to reduce the number of deaths, are actually being used to increase them, to high value targets, to kill them in their homes.
Absolutely.
And they're done deliberately so that their families will also be wiped out, so their neighbors will be killed.
Right, absolutely. I believe the Israeli magazine, 972 magazine, excellent resource for reading about what's really going on over there, since you can't get what's really going on from our mainstream media. 972 magazine reported on that fairly early in the conflict, and how Israel is really cut. Their military intelligence capabilities are really cutting edge, and that's what part of the reason. And again, not my area of expertise, even less than anything else we've talked about, but it's one of the reasons that the surrounding Arab nations have not wanted to speak up for Palestine is that they rely on Israel for military intelligence, for technologies that they are using to spy on and obliterate Palestine and now Lebanon. So absolutely, yes, AI intelligence used to target civilians, wipe out entire families. So that I would say, and part of the reason why does Israel have these technologies, thank you, yeah, is, well, they don't have to worry about funding it. It's all coming from the US. Israelis have universal health care, we don't. I don't know if this is still true, but until recently, before the current genocide, Israelis were rated some of the happiest people on earth. So why? Well, they're incredibly well resourced. They don't, they have universal health care. We don't. We're paying for their military. They don't have to pay for it. So that's
what I'm just also thinking, I like that Mediterranean food, that Mediterranean climate. I'm sure that plays a role. It's a nice, pleasant world there, or it was, but you're just destroying everything in your path. At some point, that's got to take away what joy the people might have in their lives. This is heartbreaking for me. As a Jew, I feel, I don't know whether I would feel worse if Israel was being killed, if the Jews there were being wiped out, or the fact that my co-religionists are behind this, these pogroms, this genocide, call it what you will, this Holocaust. It's a 21st century Holocaust that not just my co-religionists, Kirsten, but also my nation, my country, the United States is my country, of course, not Israel. Some Jews here, Americans, seem to think Israel's their country. I find that very, very odd and unfortunate. It's all so awful for me. And I like your comment. So many people don't seem to see it this way. That's another really pain in the heart, is that so many don't really seem to get this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's truly extraordinary. I mean, again, we've been, it's again just a marketing feat that we've been sold this this idea of Israel as somehow victims, even though even though they have perpetrated the genocide. They have been for 75 years. I grew up, my childhood friend was Edward Said. I'm still friends with his family. I have seen the Palestinians as human. My first boyfriend was Lebanese. I grew up eating falafel and baba ganoush, and so they're people. I think that's really at the bottom of people not being able to see this, is that newsflash, Palestinians are people. They're not. It's so much of the Israeli and the IDF obviously is trained to see them not as people. So much of the marketing that the Israeli government uses to persuade its own people and to perpetrate this genocide is to put out that message that Arabs are not people, and it's racism. That's all it is. I was listening to a podcast the other day that was talking about how the Israeli government is even bigoted against Sephardic Jews, right? So dark-skinned Jews are also, viewed differently. So it's bigotry. It's easy for us to it's easier for us to buy into the idea that people who look different are not worthy of the same consideration, the same rights.
Well, they'll also put in prison. I mean, it's not a democracy, much as we are no longer democracy. But again, you protest against the Israeli government, and they'll lock you up. And they certainly were very much aggressively going after the hostages' families because they spoke out against the Netanyahu government for endangering and killing many of the hostages who could have been saved if the response by Israel had been less genocidal.
Absolutely. Yeah, we don't hear about that, but it's right there. The Hannibal Directive is it's a clear directive to the IDF, kill hostages rather than allowing them to be taken as hostages where they could be used as leverage. Kill them. So,
they're 21st century Nazis, no question. I was reading about some of the Israeli military, the soldiers who are suffering from PTSD and who some are suicidal. And it's very similar to what some of the SS men, young, sometimes they're often teenagers because they're being formed. They don't really have the ability, often the strength to say no. And the uniform, it's exciting. Girls are, swoon at them and the men in uniform. And then at some moment, oh my God, I killed all these people. I tortured people. I made widows and orphans. And then they can't live with it and they kill themselves. And we see that in Israel too, but it rarely, it doesn't make the media, it doesn't make the news.
It can't be easy for anybody. And it's
I mean, I don't have a lot of sympathy for them, but it's more of, I think, an example of, it's more evidence. It's more evidence of what exactly is going on there, which is a crime against humanity.
For sure.
So we're at the end of the show, Kirsten, and thank you so much. What a treat to have you on, I think is a good way for me to describe it for me. And also, tell me if you feel this way. We'll go in 2 minutes, but I rarely find people who I feel are, there's a word for that. I think that's it. Anne of Green Gables, she used a word for people who see it the same way. And I can't remember what it is, but
kindred spirits. We are.
Yes, kindred spirits. Yes, good for you. Yeah, I don't often find kindred spirits, but maybe in your job you do more than I do.
I do, thankfully. My colleagues are a huge source of hope. Not hope on the grand scale, but at least having people to talk to is really, really key. So listen to our podcast. Join us online. Find us and we'll stay in touch too, Hal. We're not alone.
So populationbalance.org is where I can find your work.
That's
and where viewers can as well. We'll do that. And hopefully we'll talk again soon. Enjoy the holiday season.
You too, Hal. Great to talk to you.
Great to talk to you. What a great to talk to Kirsten Stade. And I will be back tomorrow. As I told, I will be here at least she just dropped off. So let me see if I can not show double Hal before we leave. And I can't even find just Hal. There we are, just Hal. All right, folks, thank you so much for sticking with us for a long video, and I'll be back tomorrow.